Hey, everybody. Welcome back, or welcome to, if this is your first time, to Four Guys Talking About AI. And it's three guys today with me, Greg Sterling, Neal Polachek, and John Girard. Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Morning, Greg.
How's it going?
Good. And as always, I feel like Andy, who's not here today, always says it's been a busy week in AI. And that's like a generic statement that he could make again and again and again. This is like the fastest moving technology space ever in the history of human invention.
Uh-huh.
So we're going to talk about four things today out of the plethora of things we could have talked about. We're going to be talking about Claude, OpenClaw, and the future of personalized agents. John's going to give us an update on that. We're going to also talk about a study that found that LLMs are changing the way we write, changing, in subtle and more profound ways, but it's part of a larger topic, and there have been multiple studies on this. We're going to talk about a provocative article that appeared in the Atlantic asking, does ChatGPT have a MySpace problem, which is really about, does the first mover survive in a market where there's ongoing refinement and somebody can come in like Apple or like Facebook and later usurp the position of the innovator. And then finally, we're going to talk about March Madness and ChatGPT, because we assume the NCAA college basketball tournament, we assume that tons and tons of people are using AI to fill out their brackets to the extent that you participate in that sort of thing. So,
And that March Madness.
right, in the madness that is March Madness.
Right.
Although we're really closing in on the end of March, but still March Madness. Anyway, John, why don't you launch into the agents discussion?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to do that. So, as you mentioned, things are moving fast, and we say that every week, but it's gotten crazy enough that it's almost a full-time job just to keep up with what's unfolding on a daily basis. In fact, I have a couple of personal agents that I've assigned the task of reviewing all the changes that may impact me and the kinds of things I'm trying to do, and give me that summary on a every morning basis. And they're always chock full of new developments. So, among so many of us are using this agent technology already. It's worth just sort of saying real quickly, what the heck is it? So personalized agents, the idea is to have an AI entity. You can think of it as an assistant. You can think of it as a friend. You can think of it as a coworker that has broad access to the various systems that you use and what your goals are in your day-to-day life, work and or personal, and is able to respond or react quickly to questions that you might have and need its help in figuring out, and also to work in an always-on kind of fashion when you're not working. So the most common use cases are to get people started on these are things like morning briefings. And I have, as an example, a very detailed morning briefing that I've set up that gives me a view into my calendar, my to-dos. It compares that to the goals that I've set for the week and the month and the quarter. It gives me a heads up on upcoming travel stuff that's going on, including travel where I haven't yet booked, a flight or lodging or whatever it might be. Lets me know when my wife might be out of town, so I can kind of think about, okay, I'm going to have to work from home. So that's a good example of an agent that it has good view into everything that I'm doing, and can kind of help me to stay organized. Now, all that information is basically out there already, and I could go check my calendar, but this changes the cognitive load for me from, a 20-minute review everything, open all the web pages and scan, to a 3-minute review of a simple text message that comes from Minna, my agent. So that's the setup there. Have you guys explored? Are you guys doing any agents yet? Have you gotten on that train?
What's going on in my head is I'm about to ask you what did you use to build your agent?
Yeah.
And if my agent wanted to follow these things, how would I build that? And so no, I haven't done it yet, but I want to.
And I have kind of the bad version set up on ChatGPT with a few things, but it's not particularly helpful.
Yeah. So I've set up, like so many other people, I've set up this sort of first pass at things in OpenClaw. And OpenClaw kind of took the world by storm 6 or 8 weeks ago. And what's interesting about it is that the capabilities that it introduced are very subtle and would not seem on the surface to be so game changing. But they kind of are. And the couple that really stand out, one is the ability to engage with the agent in any channel of your choosing. So a lot of people use the Telegram app as an example and set up a little text thread with their agent, or even SMS exchange, or Discord or Slack if you use those. So that's like, it's not a very complex technical thing to do, but that little twist, taking it outside of the ChatGPT window or app, or outside of the Claude window or website or app, and bring it out into the real world, it is a bit of an unlock. So, these agents now can interact in all the normal channels where we're used to interacting with humans, including things like email. So, my agent actually emails me my daily stuff, and then texts me stuff that's more urgent, which really makes it more of a human experience. So the other kind of big innovation in all this has been the ability for these agents to kind of wake up and do something at a specified time. So, hey, overnight, check the news on OpenClaw and everything, and pull that together and then send it to me at 6 a.m. Again, not a complicated technical problem that got solved, but it really is the first time that agents have had this sort of always on and ability to wake themselves up, which ends up being kind of game changing if you want to use these agents to help support you in the kinds of things you want to do on a daily basis. So those features of agents end up being really interesting. Last thing I'll say, just to kind of give a sense of what this looks like when you pull it all together. One of the things I've asked my agent to do is to delight me every morning at 10 a.m. And it has a choice of 5 or 6 different, patterns that it can use. Find a retro website. I love retro, MySpace. We talked about that, like style stuff. Look in my emails for an interesting, meaningful email somewhere in my past. Build me an app. Find me a podcast I don't know about. Suggest something on the travel side, or suggest music or restaurant that I might like. And I'll tell you what, it nails it. I've had this thing build me breathwork apps because I've gotten involved and interested in breathwork. Like I will, it will do that overnight, wake up and do its work and create and craft this thing, and then deliver it to me at 10 a.m. So that's sort of a little glimpse into where agent world is headed. OpenClaw, I will tell you, if you guys are thinking about using it, it's a total mess. It's really, really interesting, but it's a total mess. What inevitably is going to happen here is that the big guys, especially Claude, are just slowly but surely marching towards rolling this stuff out in a much more measured and secure way. And this is going to go broad. And then, by the way, and we've talked about this before too, in the end, Apple is going to probably win it, even though they're so far behind on everything right now, because they're in that unique place in the ecosystem where they can bring this kind of stuff to the masses. They can give it the Apple design treatment, which we know is always, or almost always A+. And they have access on your phone to every single thing that you might want to incorporate into an agent. So anyway, that's the quick update on where we are in agent land.
So let me ask you a question, John. How hard was it for you to build this thing that delights you every day at 10 o'clock?
So that piece of it, getting that part right, was really easy. Like, it was surprisingly easy. Tweaking and tuning and adding all the other things that I want to do and keeping it working has been surprisingly complex. Like, the way I would characterize this stuff is, as it stands today, it's very brittle. So, out of the box, if you follow the very explicit instructions for setting it up, you can get from 0 to, oh my God, this is cool, very quickly. And then getting from there to, this is very useful and it's actually helping me to get things done on a daily basis, is very hard. So it reminds me a little bit of snowboarding, like the learning curve on snowboarding. Your first day is actually a lot easier than your first day on skiing, but then like getting really good is actually quite hard.
Yeah. Interesting. So you don't recommend it for me yet?
Well, so I would say, look, if you want to try it out, there are hosted OpenClaw solutions. Try one of those. It's a lot safer. It walks you through the whole setup. You'll get to that, 0 to this is really interesting extremely quickly. And there's a dozen of them out there already. They started showing up literally overnight. But there are hosted OpenClaw things you can sign up for $10 a month that'll get you going.
Yeah, I think I wanted just to update me. Like, what's my week going to be like?
Yeah.
I'm working away next week. What are the things I got to remember to like hack? And that I could probably do through one of these hosted OpenClaw
You could.
solutions.
Yeah. And it would work pretty quickly. And if it doesn't work, you just nuke it and start a new one, like it's also pretty easy just to pick it up and try again.
Okay. I'm going to try it.
Yeah. Give it a whirl.
Okay. All right. So moving on to the second item, there's a piece of research that's been done recently, but it also echoes other prior research that was done on the impact of LLMs on writing and perceptions of writing. And this was by a bunch of academics at places like UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, University of Washington, and also Google DeepMind personnel were part of it. And the study is entitled "How LLMs Distort Our Written Language." And they used different methodologies where they looked at 3 studies. There was a human user study where they had 55 people use LLMs and 45 people not use LLMs, and then they evaluated the writing. They took 86 human essays collected in 2021 before LLMs in the BLLM era, and sort of ran those through an LLM to compare the prior version, the unedited version, with an LLM generated revision. And then they used 18,000 peer-reviewed articles from a journal and looked at human written reviews and LLM reviews, and used an LLM as a judge to identify the strengths and weaknesses in each review and compare scores. So I didn't do a great job just explaining that methodology, but just suffice it to say that they used a couple of different lenses on this question of how LLMs are impacting language and writing. And the conclusion that they came to is that it's changing writing, pushing it into more neutral territory, less opinionated territory, making writing safer, making it sort of duller, less sharp, less distinctive, less creative. There's a kind of a standard voice that it pushes all writing to, and personal style is diluted. Sort of outliers are softened or minimized, and it's also impacting ideas. So when you involve LLMs in the writing process or heavily in the editing process, it changes arguments, it changes meanings, it makes the writing shift in certain ways that are both subtle and meaningful. And overall, it's kind of the argument is that it's rewiring how people think about arguments and writing itself. That doesn't do justice entirely to the study, but it brings up the larger point of as we, this is the dominant use case. Writing is the main way in which LLMs are used. As we use them in our daily work for long and for short tasks, and we'll talk about another aspect of that in a second. How does that affect us? And then one thing I want to throw into the mix, this was an article in the New York Times. There was a horror novel published called Shy Girl that became very successful initially. It was published in the UK by Hachette, one of the major publishers, and it was going to be released in the US. And they discovered through the use of a third-party tool and an individual who was interested in sort of investigating the kind of veracity of the whole thing, that it was 78% generated by AI. And so the publisher has pulled it from the US release. And, this is the first time that has apparently happened. It's obviously the overwhelming majority of the book was generated by AI. And there's also the question of copyright. So the current state of the law is that AI created work, visual or written, cannot be copyrighted. However, there is a sort of an open question if there's a mix of human and AI work, like if AI is only used in the sort of late editorial stage, it probably can be copyrighted, but the courts haven't resolved that issue. How much of it has to be human and how much it can be AI. So
let's talk about it in reverse order.
yeah,
Like, if it's a good book, if it was
Yeah.
an interesting read,
why
well,
do you
I mean,
care?
well, I don't know if I care. I mean, I think it's an interesting question.
Well, would you care? Would you care? So you read this book, hypothetical situation.
I
You
read a
read this
book. I don't know who the author is.
Well, so you read a book, you get a lot out of it, or you think it's a good book or whatever. Then you're talking about it at a dinner party, and somebody says, "Hey, did you know, Neal, that was almost entirely generated by AI?"
Oh, great. I mean, I don't think I'd care if it was a good and engaging book, a good read.
Would you feel duped if you didn't know that ahead of time?
I I don't know. I don't know.
See,
I mean, it's
because
a really good. I think it's a fundamental question that we're going to have to face, actually,
well, what the
because I think more
research
of it's going to come up. I do see at the end of articles that I read that this article was AI assisted or helped written by AI or something, and I don't feel any worse about reading that than I did if I saw, John
well,
Girard's.
because you don't know the degree to which AI was involved in the creation of that article. So you're in your mind, I would imagine you think, oh, AI was somewhere in the mix. That's not a big deal. Everybody does that. But if you saw the percentage, this article was 90% generated by AI. You might feel differently.
But well, hold on. But I think it's a matter of what that article is about. If it's a recap of a basketball game, Joe Smith scored 22 points and John Girard scored 12 points and has led his team to the victory. Like, I don't think I care.
This goes to some really deep, human psychology, right? Like we have a really strong aversion to being fooled. And it makes a ton of evolutionary sense that we would have that. There's a really interesting body of information about it. It's called the freeloader problem. Like, if we can be fooled into giving somebody our resources, they're going to take advantage of that to the detriment of our, genes and kids and whatever. So that's just that's just basic psychology. And so what's interesting to me is, like, to what degree do we feel like we are being fooled when we read something in AI? Is it enough to disclose that it's AI? If it's not disclosed, do I feel like I have been fooled? And I think we've talked about this a little bit before. It may be something that is shifting and evolving very quickly. If I watch a movie and I see special effects and something blew up, and then you tell me, you know what, that didn't really blow up, I'm not going to feel angry about that, right? I'm not going to feel angry about it in the same way that if a newscast shows an explosion and then later I find out that was CGI, right? And I honestly don't know that we have landed as a collective on whether we think that AI generated stuff, at some point. I think probably we all just expect that everything has a hint of AI in it, and then I'm no longer a dupe, because I know that the thing you just sent me, even though I can see the M dash, and so I know that it's AI for other reasons. Like, I'm pretty sure you probably used it, and so I don't feel duped anymore. But if you claim that it was written by you, now all of a sudden I'm more concerned.
Yeah. I want to support what you're saying, John, because there's a bunch of research already that where consumers are exposed to AI generated writing and AI generated ads and AI generated images, and they like them until they find out that they're AI, right? The response is generally positive, overwhelmingly positive, typically in these studies. But then when they learn after the fact that this was created by AI and it wasn't disclosed, they didn't know that going in, they get upset by that. And to your point. And so to your point, Neal, about the disclosure at the bottom and the footer of the article, that might be enough, or it might depend on the particular context. A straight sort of piece of factual information like so and so won the game. It may be acceptable to me if that's entirely AI generated, but an analysis piece about economics and the impact of the Iran war on the price of oil and inflation and all that, and I read that might be something that I question if I learn later that it was generated by a machine, and it raises the point about the novel On the one hand, you're just looking for an experience, right? Was it engaging? Did it surprise
Right.
me? All of that. And so that's totally fair,
Was
right?
the
Judge,
character development good? You know, all that
yeah,
stuff.
judge the thing on its face. But then on the other hand, to bring this other study back into it, if more and more of creative work is being generated by machines with just human input and sort of uh, tweaking at the margins, then there might be a substantive impact. It's like everything is sort of compressing toward a kind of a middle, I don't know if regression toward the mean applies in this case, but yeah, so we get stuff that's less creative, less interesting, less idiosyncratic, and that either makes the stuff that's really human created much more valuable, or it dumbs people down, which is a danger in this society, that
Yeah.
things get compressed into this, everything gets homogenized into a kind of same, it's like a lot of what's happened in Hollywood over the last several decades is the market mentality, and the costs have dictated certain kinds of formulaic approaches and genres. And there's a lot of great stuff still being made, but there's less experimentation, one could argue.
Yeah, and this goes to the first part of your the conversation here about the dumbing down of content, and the way that it changes the way that we experience and play with ideas. I mean, I think on the one hand, like, would we expect anything different from a technology that effectively generates an average, right? Like, in fact, we've talked about this before too. In order to make LLM delivery not completely devoid of feeling, we've had to inject this thing called temperature, which is changing the word choice just a little bit, and at an extreme change in temperature, it comes across as ridiculous because the word choices look like an 11-year-old took a thesaurus out and just replaced everything in a sentence with something bigger. So yeah, that seems like that's a real issue. It feels to me a little bit like it's sort of like elevator music, right? Like it's just like
Bland.
it's fine. Like it's inoffensive.
Well, that's the issue of LLMs, of AI being integrated more and more into songwriting, popular music. That's happening.
Yeah, it is.
But like when I wrote a proposal for a client in using an LLM or one of these things, and it was overly effusive about our capabilities. I would never have written that. That didn't go to the median. That didn't go to some average. I mean, it was like boasting us as something we're not. So I went back in there, took all that out, because that's not us. So I mean,
that's all. By the way, that's a nudge. That's an instruction in the injection in the prompt, and this is it's the same phenomenon as if I type into the LLM while I'm figuring something out in Claude Code, hey, what about this? Have we considered this? And it comes back and says, that's a fantastic observation.
Right.
My God, you're brilliant. I mean, it doesn't quite go that far, but it sort of has that
feeling.
Efficiency, right? And so that's in the absence of some prompt engineering that's going on behind the scenes that we don't have much control over. It would be flat. And I suspect the same is true with the sort of more flowery language. That's an instruction, like to really boost and be excited and excitable.
My wife had a meeting here last night. Happens to be she's on the committee that does the high holiday service at our synagogue, and they were talking about these personal stories, and they were saying, well, who might do the personal story this fall for the services? And I'm thinking, well, just put it into one of these ChatGPT's, and we'll come up with a personal story that will connect all the dots and bring it home, and all these things that they struggle with getting a real person to do. And often the real person that they select, it's written and then it's edited. My wife does a lot of the editing, then the rabbis review it, and then these people take what the rabbis have said, that's great, and they embellish it and rewrite it again, and so it comes out poorly delivered, right? And I was sitting there literally thinking, well, let's just have one of these things write these things.
Okay, so yeah,
Much and so would the congregation be disappointed?
you're saying it's inauthentic to begin with because of all the hands that touch it. Why not just generate it from scratch and make it better out
Sort
of the
of.
gate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So I'll tell you, if somebody came up there and presented it and read some story as though it were their own story or as though it were a real story, and then I discovered after the fact that that was entirely fabricated by AI, I would leave that synagogue. I would quit that synagogue. I would be
What if that
enraged.
enabled the
I,
rabbi to spend more time with you, though, Greg,
I
because
would
they
be
were
I
able
would
to
be
leverage technology?
I would be enraged by that experience. Not just disappointed, enraged, and I would give the rabbi an earful.
Yeah. Well, this is that the disgust response that we
This,
have from Gould.
But
You know, that's what.
but
this is where the world's going, people.
well,
I
this
mean,
raises, yeah, no, totally. This is my point. This raises a much larger question. So next year we're going to have, or it's already happened, more bots online interacting with content than human beings. More and more content is going to be partially or entirely AI generated. Agents are going to be doing our bidding and doing things that we would have done. So the internet is becoming more and more machine driven to the extent that it's not already, and less human, less and less of a human voice, less of a human interaction. And it raises this whole question about integrity, authenticity. I mean, there's some very basic philosophical questions. You know, if we're talking about sort of utilitarian things like I need to replenish my supply of toothpaste, go do that for me. I need the summary in the morning to give me the news. Sure, but there's just a question about at what point do we draw a line and say this is reserved for people or should be reserved for people. I mean, we're already in the midst of a pretty significant AI backlash that people in the industry don't fully understand, but in the
Yeah.
general population exists. And there was a Bloomberg piece, I think, about the bad job that AI companies have done with PR and talking about AI and giving, educating the public and talking about the future. And there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of resentment, and I see it all the time. I've talked about this before. I don't want to see this AI thing. I want to block the AI thing, right? So there's going to be two camps, and they're represented by John's in the middle somewhere. You, Neal, everything is AI. I don't care. Nothing matters to me. And then my camp, which is, no, I know I'm being unfair to you.
I know.
Right. Okay. So quality matters, and it doesn't matter what the source is. And for me, I see AI as a tool that has utilitarian value, but I'm not gonna. I don't want it in every aspect of my experience. You know.
One of the kind of like slightly under the surface stories that's evolving here is people are actually starting to develop a sense for the AI written voice, and and it's even being described like, oh my God, when you see it, the sentence says this and this and this.
The M dash, yeah, that
the M dash is like the most obvious kind of single typographical kind of tell, but there's also these kind of rhythms and these comparisons like AI, depending on the model, it very often will, when it's trying to be informal and friendly, it'll say something like, it's almost as if you da 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 da, like that, like that's the phrasing and the framing. And so people are catching on to this. So what happens with these things, so this is in some ways like the usual arms race between cheating and cheating detection. So what happens is cheaters figure out how to cheat. The cheating detectors who don't want to get duped figure out how to figure out they're being cheated. They create a defense. This is classic example in evolution, but you can think of it pretty much anywhere this phenomenon happens. Like think virus protection, right? Hacking, so the virus protection now is able to do this. Hackers get around that. Now the virus protection is updated. Hackers get around that. Like, so the same thing is happening here. In a weird way, it might actually help solve the problem, because if there's enough instruction and work done to obfuscate the obvious AI voice, maybe we sort of start to reintroduce flair and interestingness. Like maybe there's at least a market driven reason for AI companies to try to get this to not be so flat and average.
Well, I'll tell you one final thing, and then I think we should move on to the next item. I notice in my own use of AI, which is very heavy daily usage, that my willingness to engage with certain kinds of writing or certain kinds of material is becoming less. It's like a muscle that's starting to atrophy in a certain way because it's so much easier to do certain AI things, right? The
Throw it
idea,
in the AI and get a summary.
right?
Like long form content, basically.
That's right. That's right. And so that's an impoverished experience. It's useful if I have to understand what the gist of something is very quickly to decide, do I want to dive further into it or do I want to move on? But the energy, time, the brain power, the analytical ability that is required to engage with complex material, longer form material. I mean, people can't finish books now, and I'm included in that. And that's not because of AI, but that's because of all the started with MTV, now it's TikTok or whatever. Nobody's attention span is sustained anymore. And there are human costs, even though there are conveniences and efficiencies to be gained from AI, there are real human costs, not talking about jobs, in just your mental acuity, your all of these things that people have been talking about. I think it's real, and I'm starting to experience that in my own life, and it's disturbing to me.
Yeah.
I'm getting lazy. I'm getting lazy.
Sure. But you're also like, look, you're disturbed, and that's the beginning of a reaction. You know what I mean? And I think that is happening at least a little bit. Like whenever we run into a situation where we've got something that we don't like I realize that my attention is being hijacked. That's when I might actually take some responsibility and try to bring it back. I mean, I had the same problem with reading, and I had to retrain myself to read. I wasn't reading anything, and it was just like 4 or 5 years ago. I was like, maybe I forgot how to read. This is crazy. And it took me like a month to be able to focus enough to read more than a page. And then I did, and now I'm reading, honestly, like 100 books a year. So like, that disappointment, frustration, maybe is the catalyst for doing something about it.
Okay. On that note, I mean, there's a lot more to talk about, a lot of interesting subtopics in there. But on that note, let's talk about the piece that showed up in the Atlantic by a writer named Egon Bogost, I believe, who I've not read before, heard before. The article is entitled "The MySpace Dilemma Facing ChatGPT." And the short version is that
the AI summarized version.
Right, exactly. I started reading it, but I just lost my ability to follow through.
What was I doing?
So the thrust of the article is that there's a way in which AI is sort of becoming commoditized, and there are fewer and fewer advantages. Right, there aren't that many modes. Switching costs are low. AI is becoming sort of more ubiquitous, and it's easy for people to shift from ChatGPT, which is still the market leader, to Gemini, which is being integrated in every single Google product, or Claude, which has gotten a lot of uptake recently because of its ethical position vis-a-vis the Department of Defense. And there's a first mover problem that exists in the history of the internet, exemplified by two sets of companies, Friendster and MySpace losing out to Facebook, which was a second mover and created a better product, or the BlackBerry losing its share, and Nokia, for that matter, to the iPhone, which was a better product. So the late mover can come in and perfect the product. There's a number of variables here, but the central idea is, if there's more commoditization of AI and more ubiquity of AI, then people may not need ChatGPT, right? And their first mover advantage and their brand advantages, which still exist, it may not be meaningful as AI gets integrated into everything we use and just becomes a layer of the experience.
And didn't I think I read that OpenAI had a red alert?
Well, that was when Gemini
No,
got much better.
this is recent. This is like in the last few days.
constant red alert. It's just
right, because they saw this movement over to Claude, and they're like going to redouble their efforts to deliver value to enterprises. So like they're shifting all day long to try and, you know, adapt and adjust to how the market's changing and where they can make money, I think.
If you think about the examples, right, those are largely consumer examples, and they also were examples with non-trivial lock-in. Like I have my phone, I'm pretty locked into my phone. Like I've got all my friends on MySpace or Friendster. Like that's pretty good lock-in, and yet those were displaced, right? So I think that the lock-in, the friction, you know, for the switching costs are 1,000 times lower for these LLM, you know, models. I mean, you know, especially on the consumer side. Like you can just wake up one day and go like, I'm not using OpenAI anymore. I'm gonna switch to Claude, and you're good to go at, you know, by 9:15 in the morning.
Well,
you know what I mean?
John, this goes back to what you were saying about these guys.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
like,
true.
They're just sitting around waiting to figure out.
That's the answer, right?
Yeah.
So because they've got, like, Apple has the ecosystem locked up, and so you know, on the iPhone side, I mean, okay, yes, there's Android and whatever, but like, you know, they're just waiting, and they're going to use, you know, ChatGPT in the background until they don't want to do that anymore, and then they're going to use Claude until they want to do that anymore. Now they're using Gemini. Like it's hot swappable on the backside for them. Now, granted, all that's true. The reason I think that LLMs or the, you know, the AI companies are interested in you know, appealing to the business side is that there's slightly higher switching costs there.
For sure.
You know, you do an agreement, it's a 4-year agreement or whatever it is. And you know, like you've got them locked in for some period of time. Whereas consumers with their fickle natures may just wake up one day and say,
well, the stakes are much higher. I mean, that's implied in your comments. The stakes are much higher. If I'm building a whole code base with Claude, I'm not going to then shift over to ChatGPT or something else. Or if I've integrated, I mean, it's possible to, you know, there's a number of third-party tools which will integrate the foundation model behind whatever their functionality is, and so it's not as visible to you. And those kinds of situations, maybe it is in a B2B context possible to switch, but for the most part, you've integrated this tool into your system, and there's some unwinding that might have to happen, or you become dependent upon a certain way of doing business with that tool. And so I think you're right. But I mean, this is a slightly different point, but OpenAI has screwed up a couple of times, and there are a couple of unforced errors that reasons why Claude may be surging right now. I mean, Claude built a strong enterprise business on the back of its coding capabilities, but the PR snafus with, you know, the opportunistic, you know, we'll do business with the U.S. government. We don't care about how you use our technology. And also the ads thing that Claude took advantage of in a very humorous and kind of effective way for the Super Bowl. So there's been some unforced errors on OpenAI's standpoint, from OpenAI's standpoint. But the point about the, you know, where is the ultimate value created, and how do you build a moat around it? That's a very valid point that many VCs have raised for quite a long time, you know?
Well, and that enterprise note, you saw that Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, said that they're now going to double their sales by 2036 because of AI.
They're talking about
they double expected at 300 billion. They now think they'll be at 600 billion.
Is this Amazon consumer sales, or is this AWS?
The enterprise stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's an imperative to use it, and Amazon is already a pretty well entrenched player. Okay, so let's then.
Well, we can do this next week. Why don't we do this next week? We'll be in the middle of March Madness.
Well, why don't you give us a little preview before we sign off?
Well, the preview is, you know, it looks like 30 million people used AI to help fill out their March Madness bracket. And that's up from, you know, some who did it last year. But one can only imagine in 3 or 4 years that all the brackets will be the same, because if you use AI is a predictive tool. You get no random stuff in there. You don't pick a dark horse and all that. But I did ask this morning ChatGPT and Claude to pick me a dark horse or a what do they call it, a Cinderella winner, and they both picked the same team. So here's my pro tip for the day: pick Virginia Commonwealth University to win it all. That's based on.
But don't you think hundreds of thousands of people will have that pick also?
They could. They could.
I mean, you know, this goes back to the point about the homogenization
Right.
of language and content. You know, if everybody's using the same tools and with the same inputs, then you're going to get a lot of standardized stuff coming out on the other end.
Yeah, it will. I mean, it's, you know, but you could probably prompt it in a way that would give you a better dark horse pick.
Yeah, I want a dark horse pick, but not the one that you're giving to everybody else.
That's right. Not the one you're giving to everybody else. Well, we'll see how it does. I mean, we'll see how it does.
Well, you should
weeks.
did you do a full set of?
I didn't do a full AI pick bracket.
That's what you should do. See, the experiment would be ChatGPT, Gemini.
Started. I could do it for the second round. Right,
but all, you know, somebody is doing it somewhere where you have every single one of these.
Every AI pick.
Right.
And then, yeah. I picked UCLA because I always pick UCLA, even though I don't expect them to win.
Okay.
It's my interest.
All right. Well, whether you're a basketball fan or not, thanks for being with us, and join us next week where we see how good Neal's AI March Madness picks were.
There we go.
Okay.
Have a great day.
All right. Bye-bye.